Let me know when you're ready and I'll start over.
Leave some wires and.
I'll call this meeting of the Jefferson County Planning Commission to order. First, we'll have roll call.
Mike Pittman.
Here.
David Brommer.
Here.
Britt Copeland. Ray Black.
Present.
Warren Oxshire.
Here.
Jenny Beverly.
Here.
Lisa Hammock.
Here.
David Ferguson.
Here.
Jean Rydell.
Here.
Pat McGrath.
Here.
We have a quorum, so we'll continue with our meeting. First, we have consideration of our minutes from May 8th. Has everyone had an opportunity to read those and any changes, deletions? If not, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes as written.
I make a motion to approve the minutes.
All right, can we have a second? All right, any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Passed unanimously. Next, we have a new individual in our office that takes care of our day-to-day and will also be acting as secretary to the Plan Commission. And Taylor Ballak. Is that close enough?
That's
all
correct.
right. And we need to take action to appoint her officially as secretary to the PC Plan Commission.
I'll make that motion.
All right, we have a second.
Second.
We have first and second. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye, opposed, same sign. All right. Then the two other items that we have on our agenda this evening is to discuss possibility of reviewing our solar ordinances. We did those probably a year or two ago, and since then came to attention there may be a few areas that need to be addressed and polished a little bit on those, and then also has came up that we probably need to do something in our ordinances to address the need for distillery house, barrel house storage installations. So on the solar, I think some of the main areas that we may need to consider is what we require on the bond, the decommissioning side of it. May need some visit on setbacks. I'm sure there would be quite a few other issues that could come up in that side of things. And so wanting to get some input from the board as a whole is what thoughts are on that and what type of responses they're feeling in the community. When we did our ordinances, we did all of them at one time. And so we were really pushed on trying to cover everything and did not necessarily dig in as deep to each individual section, especially the ones that were new to us as we went through those. So we want to see what people's thoughts are on those. I've reached out to Amy Williams, who is the person that helped us with our first set of ordinances, and had her put together a proposal that if we would decide to revisit them, a process that we could go through of having a couple of meetings of either a committee or the group as a whole, and then a public hearing on any proposed changes that resulted from those meetings and so forth. And
So currently, Warren, what is our bond now?
currently on the bond, I think we require 25% initial construction, and then it goes up to 50% at a certain stage, and then to a higher percentage of that at a later stage. And I think the one proposal that has been brought in is beyond our 25% in their proposal they're putting out from the very start. So it's a little bit different on that. But there were other areas too. There's a letter that I gave you, an email that Lynette Anderson had sent in to us, who was our Plan Commission secretary, and she'd been reading through her ordinances, and she points out some places where some of it may just be a matter of language changes that need to be cleared up and so forth. But she gives some examples of some areas that she had some concerns on as well that we would look at and clear up.
I've got a question. When we did the UDO, I seem to remember there's a third party that actually figures out what the decommissioning would cost. Is that correct? I think that's what
No, we don't have a certain party, to my knowledge, in the UDO that establishes what decommissioning would cost. You, you have a copy out there. I can look real quick. but
Yeah,
I
I
don't.
was thinking we did that.
It's- We talked about the cost being reviewed.
It's accessories.
Would anyone like a copy of our ordinances? Ordinances?
I was thinking it was, there's gonna be a definition.
You see it?
Decommissioning plan.
Are you licensed or restriction? So she's just.
Yeah, it's a third party license.
Right, but we don't name a particular
No, we don't make some
company.
particular.
Right, I may have misunderstood the question. We have provisions where there'd be a third party as such, but we don't name a particular company that would come in to do that evaluation as such.
Well, we probably shouldn't, because that could change in 6 months.
Yes, that-
you know,
yeah,
they go out of
yeah.
business or
Well, and you want it to be open or competitive
Right.
or so forth.
Mhm.
What's the board's thought as a whole? And then let me, before we go on to that a little bit, as well. David, can you bring us up on some of the issues as to where the barrel houses came up?
Yeah, the barrel houses, I guess in Jennings County, they have a proposed barrel houses just outside the county line, just north of DuPont. And they're from Seagram's down there at Lawrenceburg. And there's a lot of concern in the Jennings County / DuPont area with the black mold that comes off these barrel warehouses. And I guess that concern is just pretty legit. I've talked to some company or people that live around the barrel houses in Kentucky and some of that bourbon, and they do have to keep their cars and vehicles parked inside, you know, or if they keep them out of long periods, and their vehicles and houses will turn black. And I don't know the health side of it. I just know that part of it. But I do know Ripley County put in some zoning in there it doesn't regulate them in a sense, it keeps them, they have to do jump through some hoops as far as checking the air quality and, you know, the mold levels and that kind of thing. And then that's going on, I guess, in Grant County, Kentucky. Seagram's is looking at that, and they're having a big concern because theirs is going near water. Those warehouses are, and you know, the one time was it Jack Daniels, theirs caught on fire and went into the water stream and killed a bunch of fish and that kind of thing. And that's a concern of the one in Grant County in Kentucky. So I do think we need to have something in our ordinances that, you know, at least some guidelines, because they can do anything right now for the most part, so.
In our current guidelines, another area that we don't separate out that probably needs to be done so when it comes to the distillery and the barrel storage. In Indiana, there's a classification that's an artisan distillery, which is a fairly small distillery as such. And we're treating those pretty much as if all of them are the same. And so there may be need to give some consideration if an artisan distillery would be able to go in locations that a regular full-blown distillery would not have and not able to go in.
Would we get into fire suppression, that type of thing, or?
We could, I mean, I haven't seen anything as far as what other counties have done, other than what Ripley has done.
And then what the state requires, do we even know? what
At
the
this
state-
time, we don't, you know, the point of, we would decide to look further into all this would be to put together the process and a meeting and so forth to gather whatever information is necessary, to do that as such. What's the board's thoughts on that?
I think we need to look into it, because like you said, the water safety and then the fire is a real danger here. Especially in rural areas where we have volunteer fire departments.
I need to be taken back to ground zero here.
Okay.
What is the purpose of storing these? I mean, what is the future of these barrels? I mean,
They're full of whiskey
They are full- they are full.
they're aging spirits,
okay,
yes,
all right.
yes.
I thought maybe they're,
No, they're aged, and that was part of the confusion in Jennings County when the notices went out. Jennings County did a very good job of notifying surrounding property owners. They had to change the zoning to industrial. And the notices addressed it as barrel storage and other light items. And the majority of the residents were all under the assumption that it was something like the barrel storage you see on your way to Louisville on the left before Charleston, where they're processing old barrels and selling them for flower beds and
Yeah.
different things. They did not realize that it was going to be large alcohol storage facilities. They would be bonded warehouses normally is where they go in. And they are known to have a problem with black fungus that grows and feeds off of the evaporating alcohol in the area. You can look in areas, drive up to Lawrenceburg, Aurora area and go back to where there's barrel house storage, and you'll see the surrounding homes all have a pretty good coating of black. And there's certain areas, there's been a lot of opposition to them going in and so forth. And we've got calls on it because originally, with it being as close to the Jefferson County line and with DuPont residents being concerned, they called our plan commission thinking that it was under our jurisdiction, and it wasn't. Such.
So where would these be in our zoning? Are they considered light commercial or heavy industrial? Because I noticed that we have both warehouses in both areas.
Yes, that's part of the problem that probably needs to be cleared up.
Mhm.
And part of the artisan distillery, the way they fall in both areas and so forth. So they would probably need to fall more in a heavy industrial area than they would in just this.
this land that they're operating on, do they own it or lease it?
I believe they purchased the land or are going to purchase it. David may know more on that than I do, but it's.
I don't know anything
Don't know
for
for
sure,
sure.
just hearsay, so.
It's my understanding they purchased private land. It could be a lease. I don't know which it would be for certain.
But the one right on the line, I think they're putting in multiple warehouses. I don't know, 7 or 11, they got stages. They're gonna do so many at first and keep adding to them, so.
And what are the thoughts on further discussion on our solar ordinances of looking at those more in depth?
Should we review what she's got on here and see if there, or would we,
What's that?
Lynette had made suggestions.
Yes, sure, we can look through those if you want.
On the only thing on the bondage. For the bond, not bondage, bond, my concern is we don't have it all up front. We're not guaranteed of any sort that they can, if they start the project and they have 25% and they've already started the project. I mean, do we have any guarantees they're gonna get the other percentage? And if they don't, what's our recourse? If they've
Well,
already started the project, then you get tied up in lawsuits and that, and things get drug out, and it really is not a benefit to anybody.
The recourse that we would have at this time, with the project being an ongoing project, is they would be subject to penalty under our ordinances. It calls for a certain amount of fine, it's a violation, and they would be fined until they came into compliance. So you'd be able to take court action against that to support it. There seems to be more of a concern, though, at the tail end of being certain that you have a bond structure that is going to cover you 30 years from now or 35 years from now, to whereas the company has to be inoperable, the panels have to be inoperable for 12 months before they're considered that they would have to be decommissioned and taken out under our ordinance. So you could have a situation easily where a company knows they're going out of business, going to be operating and so forth. And we don't have provisions that would necessarily keep that bond from being dropped. You know, they drop the bond and the company that owns what's left of the solar field doesn't have any assets necessarily. I mean, you can see normally what can happen in those situations. Corporations, if they know they're going to be going out of business in a particular area, they'll move assets into a corporation that's not holding anything. And so regardless of how many fines or what you have, there is nothing to go after as such. Our ordinances also, some counties have looked at making the property owners responsible as well. You know, that if the company failed to remove the equipment, that it falls back that the property owner still has a requirement to remove it as well. And that it could be an action taken against the property owner if it's not removed. And so those are all various things that would have to have a lot of discussion as to where.
What about insurance? I know, like when we're at the power plant, everything is additional insured. They're named, everybody and their brothers on those insurance.
Insurance normally covers for bodily injury and property
General
damage.
liability, though, but environmental, because we have.
Most still have environmental exclusions, some don't, but I don't know that it would be the same thing. You would have to be, I don't think insurance really comes into play on the decommissioning side.
Because if it has any kind of hazards and there's environmental issue, just like underground storage tank, whoever put those in is ultimately responsible. Wouldn't this be the same thing?
Well, possibly, will you also see though, case after case of where there's underground storage tanks and the entity put them in
Right.
isn't in business anymore or doesn't have any money, and so public
Becomes a
funds
brownfield
ends up,
project.
becomes a brownfields and the public funds end up pulling it out. And you know, the conversations I've heard a great deal is to try to avoid to where the county would be put into a position of picking up decommissioning costs at some point in time.
Right.
So, and then there's also been discussion that I've heard at the county government level as to do we want to give any consideration as to the density of the amount of solar in the county? You know, that some counties have looked and said, well, we've got this many acres of tillable, we will allow this much to go in, and then that'll be it. There's others that have set it up and said, well, you can put certain size solar fields in, but if you're gonna put in additionals, they have to be a certain distance from those. You know, there's just a lot of areas there that's interesting. It's interesting when you talk to counties, and I've made calls to three, I believe it is, counties that have experienced this. All of those counties have either changed their ordinances since the solar went in, or they're in the process of changing them now. And they have learned in certain areas as to where they need to make some changes and help the situation along. The proposal that Amy had sent, you had a copy of it. She's suggesting a fee of $4,830 to come in and go through a couple of meetings with us. We'd have to determine who all we want to participate in those meetings. They would be public meetings. And then also we would, if any changes come as a result of that, then there would be a public hearing held to discuss the proposed changes. And she would oversee that. Then once it was completed, any of the changes would be put into our current PDF form with the hyperlinks and so forth that we have in the on our website. I don't think that if it is something we're wanting to do, it's something that we have the expertise in-house to handle on our own necessarily. And Mike and I haven't talked in detail, or I haven't talked to Commissioner Bramer as far as what the availability of funds would be to pay the fee. Is there thing in budgets to cover that?
Not at the moment, not in what I've got.
Sure, we've got. Do you think it could be, we could find the funds? What's your thoughts,
Pocket change.
David?
No, it's not pocket change, however. Well, I mean, I think, just like you said, I mean, people have gotten into it and things that you try to think of everything, but obviously there's things that you're gonna get missed, and so I think it's worth doing that. It's worth including the battery storage as well, because that's something we probably didn't think much about that is now, and then adding the other ones, kind of pulling the warehouses out to identify them specifically rather than just as some general accessory buildings. So,
and I think that whatever tech group that we put together, I'd probably get a little bit of information from Amy on it, but I think it's important that we also have someone that's from the solar industry that has been involved in some of this, that they also be a member of that group. Such. So we have,
You know, some of the counties are adopting tillable land versus solar land. And what that percentage is that they let that max out at.
I don't know what the percentages are. I know that there have some that have addressed it there. I know that there's some counties that they were surprised. I think Decatur is one. Decatur, for example, they've been debating this issue, and there was some of the agricultural community was speaking very much against it. But then the question came up about, well, why don't we put a limit of the number of acres on it? And those same
guy
people
said,
immediately
"No,
spoke
no,
up
no."
and said, no, we don't want that because
Because of-
things might change and we'll want to lease our ground to them down the road. So, you know, it was a toss up on that aspect of it. It was very interesting. The first call that I made to talk to another county to get a little bit of advice as to where this had went through, I called and they'd been through a project and so forth, and explained she was the director of the plan commission, had been with the county for 38 years and so forth. And I explained to her I was president of Jefferson County Plan Commission and would like to get a little advice. Can you tell me anything? And the first comment she had was run. And I think that was directed a great deal as well towards the divisiveness and conflict and the issues that they dealt with as a county as a whole in handling it as such. Yeah.
I don't know where their ordinances were with respect to solar, you know, that could have been something too, that it was.
Mhm.
So, but.
They're rewriting them currently. Anyone from the public have any thoughts on this subject? Feel forward to come up and state a name and we'd be glad to listen.
I'll go.
Yeah, Michael Kressner, Vice President of Development for Ryan Renewables, which is one of the companies that is developing a solar project here. And you know, I'll just say very generally, you know, we're obviously very supportive of making ordinances better and more responsive to concerns and risks in the community. And it's one of the big reasons why, in terms of our project specifically, we've gone above and beyond the existing Jefferson County ordinance to reflect kind of our best practices and learning from our development history in terms of what is best. And certainly on the decommissioning front, we definitely encourage having stronger restrictions on the decommissioning front, because that is a backstop that should make a lot of people feel a lot more comfortable in terms of their own concerns. And then on setbacks, you know, the devil's in the details, and I would just offer up that you know, there is a pretty natural human tendency to say more is better, but there is a balance there because there are unintended consequences as a result of going that route. And you know, in terms of guiding our siting practices, we put a lot of thoughts and have a lot of experience in terms of determining not just what the county says, but you know, how we would go ahead and site our own facilities because of that experience. And it's a balance at the end of the day in terms of permitting an environment that actually allows for realistically a solar project while balancing the concerns out of neighbors and whatnot. And there's a definitely middle ground responsibility of all sides to try to get to. But overall, you know, Orion would be happy to offer up our industry experience and knowledge through this process. And as we always have, encourage the county to reach out to us if they have questions, and we'd be happy to participate in any process you all would like to pursue.
And I haven't looked in, of course, because it'd become before the BZA, not this body as such, but I haven't looked in great detail, but my first pass through it, I believe under the project you're currently have an application in for, the setbacks probably all exceed ours by at least double, if not more. Just off the,
Certainly on the
at least on the
setback.
ones that are non-participating
Right.
properties.
Right, I don't know it's double from the setback from property lines, but certainly It's almost double, if no, it is double that from residences. We've increased it on almost everything, so setbacks from roads, public rights of ways, property lines and whatnot.
No, I've noticed there are counties that have taken the approach and have put setbacks in that are very, very large. And that I understand completely how that can cause more problems. You have all this wasted land to a certain extent then, and what do you do with it? It's not quite enough to farm, and yet it could turn into a mess. So there could be a lot of issues there.
Sorry to interrupt you, Warren, but to add on the extreme end of that spectrum is, setbacks so large that they're essentially de facto moratoriums.
Yes.
On development.
Yes.
Which is obviously something we would push back greatly against in our biased perspective, but yeah, no, I think there's a lot of room in terms of improvements, and we try to do our best voluntarily. Again, just to implement in our experience, what is that best balance to try to address both sides of the fence in terms of concerns and whatnot.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Here for questions.
Anyone else? Do you think we could find the dollars bringing in to help? I'd entertain a motion on how the board wants to proceed.
I'll make the motion.
Consider that we retain Amy. We have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye, opposed? Passes unanimously. How do you want to go about setting up the committee as to who will be on it? Do any of you particular board members want to volunteer to serve on that committee? And we definitely need to reach out and bring someone in from the solar side as well. I was a little surprised since she's familiar with things. Lynette Anderson thought she would be willing to sit on it and help with it some, because after she brought the one thing to our attention, I think she feels a little guilty that she may have should have read a little closer when we went through and picked up a few. We were looking at, a document like that, and we just didn't quite catch all of it.
What do you guys think about everybody being on it? That way, if some people don't show up, there's always enough to participate.
I am fine with that. If you want the entire planning commission to be on it, that'd be fine. And preference, I probably accommodate people early evenings on the meetings about the same time that we have here. And then I will talk to Amy, who's had quite a bit of experience with this down in Clark County as well, and have some discussions with her, and we'll go from there. The board is comfortable then with any additions that between Amy and myself that we come up with to put on the board, or do you want me to run those back by you?
I would like to see an outside engineering firm. Get on there and consultants.
And then another area that involves the BZA probably more so on it than it directly does us, other than we're responsible for putting together the ordinances, the development standards and so forth. And the BZA then takes a look to see how those are applied and so forth. I look at this, and when I look at this application that's came in and so forth, I don't know what steps the BZA is going to need to look at it, getting some support on their end. I look at other states that do some of this, they handle it a little bit different. A certain amount of it's handled at a state level. And Kentucky, they call a siting board or sitting board. I'm not sure exactly which it is. It may be sitting board, I believe, is how they actually show it. And the state gets involved in reviewing application. They actually have either engineers on staff or off staff that review documents, effect on land values and so forth. There's other opinions that are issued. And to give you some idea, you don't have the application book's about probably 4 or 5 inches. So there's going to be a lot for them to review, and I'm not quite certain how that whole process is going to work for them. So that'll be something they can work with Pat as well on to determine, but something to give some thoughts. Does anyone else have any other business for this evening? I'd put out a question in the, while we're in the process of making these changes, how does it affect the application that's already been submitted? I'm asking our attorney.
I mean, if the application's already been submitted, then generally speaking, it would go through the procedure that's
That's what
been
I thought.
established by the ordinance currently. So, changes that are made to the ordinance after this wouldn't apply to that application. Sorry.
Then where would we be on being able to either accept or not accept additional applications until this is done?
I would need to do a little bit more research on that. I don't think that the Plan Commission or the Board of Zoning Appeals has the authority to put a stay on accepting applications because those boards are charged with enforcing the ordinances as they stand. But I can do some more research into that as to what body would be potentially the appropriate body for that and make
Okay.
a recommendation at the time.
That'll be fun. All right.
So Warren, real quick, is Amy gonna help with the barrels too?
Yes, that's all in one package as such.
Okay.
Yeah. then she should.
Do that for free, she says.
She doesn't
Okay.
think that's quite as involved, so.
Free.
She could say.
Well, I know, I mean, Amy has been very good, so I may needle her a little bit about that, but I'm okay. I think she-
Yeah, they're in the process of redoing all the ordinances for the city of Madison as well.
Yep. That's all that.
What's really scary about like the barrel storage out in the community seriously is our volunteer fire departments. People are at work. And if there's an accident, they gotta drive back to the fire station. So that is something that concerns our county.
If there's no other business, I'd entertain, anyone else have anything? Anything Commissioner Bramer to bring us up to date on or?
Still getting those, we're kind of waiting on the stormwater management ordinance, waiting on the city, but that's turned into a long wait, so we're just gonna go ahead and finish ours and go forward.
And we may want to have our technical committee meetings up at the MA building to where we have a little more room.
Sure.
I have no idea what to expect on the public response at those meetings as such. But, we could, if we cut it down to where only one member of this board was on it and everyone else, and they're just an advisory board, those two meetings wouldn't have to be open to the public, but I think it's better to make that whole process open and transparent to the public and
I hope we have a big turnout.
get some input as we go along on it, so. I entertain a motion, we adjourn then.
So move.
Second,
I'll second.
all in favor? Aye.
Hey, Dan.